Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is David Dastmalchian, an actor you may know from his roles in the Marvel Ant-Man movies, or from his appearances in Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners or Blade Runner 2049, or maybe The Belko Experiment, Bird Box, or Relaxer. He also wrote and starred in the independent dramas Animals and All Creatures Here Below, and this Friday you can see him opposite Idris Elba, Margot Robbie, and David Melchior in The Suicide Squad, which is kind of a big deal. This episode of the show is a little different. David's shooting a movie in Berlin right now, and the way things came together, I wasn't able to get his pick until we actually started recording. It's happened a couple of times in the past, but I've always been able to wing it. I've seen a lot of movies. But for the very first time, a guest picked a movie I hadn't seen. David went with Impetigore, a 2019 horror film from Indonesian filmmaker Joko Anwar, starring Tara Basro as a young woman who returns to the village of her birth with a friend to fix up an old house, only to discover something truly terrible is happening all around them. I'd seen a couple of Anwar's other films, but not this one, so you're about to hear the first episode of Someone Else's Movie where I discover the film right along with the listener. Fortunately, I couldn't have had a more enthusiastic guide. Here we go.
You know, I was thinking a fun movie to talk about is Impetigore. I don't know if you're familiar with that film. It's the Joko Anwar Indonesian horror film that came out in 2019. Have you seen it?
I have not, but we can talk about it. Feel free to walk me through it. This will be a new interesting thing for us. It wasn't at TIFF, right? But
I discovered it thanks to Shudder. I think it was,
okay.
or Fangoria. I can't remember why I sought it out, but you know, Anwar's films are so good. But I was just behind. I was behind the eight ball in discovering Joko's work, and then I found it, and I was like, oh my god! And that was it's actually, even though that's one of his more recent films, it was like my gateway drug into his filmmaking.
Ah, okay. Yes, I've seen Satan's Slaves. That's why I know his name.
I love Satan's Slaves. I love it. It's so great.
Yeah, he's what I know of his work is the joy. Like, he has so much fun making these movies.
Oh, yeah. Like such a student of the genre. I think such a, like, you know, has such a passion for it, the way that some of the contemporary, you know, artists that have been really like leaders in genre, like Del Toro, have. But you could tell that Anwar's just got such a distinct voice too, and has no fear of creating utter chaos on screen. like plot lines can go non-linear, characters can get introduced, you know, early in the game and have no significance, or late in the game and be intensely significant. It's just like, it's so fun watching his movies, because I feel like I'm so jaded, and getting my expectations upended is such a pleasure for me, you know?
Yeah. Well, that was my experience with Satan's Slaves, which is, oh, okay, I have absolutely no idea where this is going from. It not where it's going from. I have no idea where it's coming from or where it's going. It is rooted in family, but then all of a sudden it just decides it isn't. And that's fine. Yeah. Like, he makes it all possible. Del Toro is a really good point of comparison. That's an artist who, once he has your trust, once you know he's got a plan, it's much easier to adjust to his tone. I remember people complaining about Crimson Peak, and it's like, no, it knows exactly what it's doing. You just have to assume that it's going to get there.
Crimson Peak. Yeah. It does. It knows exactly what it wants to be, and it's not following the. He's such a mold breaker, and it's why it's so important to have filmmakers like him supported by studios, because he can take, you know, established tropes and all the things we love about film, especially genre film, and then, you know, break all the patterns. And I think Crimson Peak's a perfect example of that. And yet at the same time, if you're a lover of classic Hammer, etc., like, you know, we are, you get such a kick and the joy out of it, you know? So I think that looking at the films like Impetigore, Satan's Slaves, I don't know, there's just, Joko's just such a daring director. And I don't know, like his story or how his career came to be. I'm just assuming this is somebody from the beginning who just took like such huge swings and risks and just went for it, you know?
Yeah, well, he's grew up watching Kung Fu and horror. I'm basically just reading Wikipedia. My apologies. Grew up watching Kung Fu and horror films as a child in Medan, spent a year in the United States as an exchange student in West Virginia.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah. Wanted to study filmmaking, but didn't because he instead enrolled at the Bandung Institute of Technology to study aeronautical engineering and then became a journalist and film critic in Jakarta. So,
oh my God,
that is an incredible career path. And
so it's no wonder that his stories too are layered with so much social commentary, so much, there's a lot of socio-political question wrangling that goes on in his stories, and lots of really wonderful explorations, I think, of like the dark places and black magic, but in its connectivity to family,
class realities and
lineage, class, genetics. I think the left behind people, you get a lot of that in his films. I think people that are, have been left behind. You look at like a really creepy orphanage setting and you're like, oh man, I don't know. He's super talented. I really hope, maybe he'll stumble across this interview someday and then be like, oh, I'm going to make a movie in West Virginia about the horrors I saw there, and I'm going to cast David Dastmalchian in it.
I mean, there must be a connection to American cinema in all horror, right? These days, I'm trying to figure out how to say that without denying the traditions of horror everywhere else. But American horror cinema is like the defining. It's the language. It's the spoken language that everybody connects to. It was Hammer horror in the 60s, and then it was psychological thrillers, and now it is. I want to make movies.
I think the Americans did the Germans really kicked it off, and then the Americans took the baton with Universal, and then the British really clobbered it for a couple decades, and then the Americans reclaimed it with this, just neon bloodlit, all throughout. This is like you're saying, we're not to deny the huge influence of Italian cinema. I mean, for goodness sake, Brazilian cinema, you get people like Coffin Joe, the Mexican incredible filmmakers, and Giallo, of course, is so huge and hugely influential on what came in the 80s with all the slasher films, which I love. I'm a huge geek for slasher. I'm a huge geek for, really aggressive, intense horror. Texas Chainsaw is one of my favorites of all time. But then things just really went to, I feel like, these incredible Asian filmmakers from a lot of different countries in the 90s into 2000s, early aughts, really went to another place with getting under our skin when it comes to our fears of death, as opposed to all the other kind of psychological exercises that I think we were going through with slasher or with, gore porn or whatever. And now we're at this moment, and it's been in the last 10 or so years, and Del Toro and Peele and a bunch of other incredible artists and filmmakers have started this renaissance of horror. And what's so wonderful about it, if you think about it, there's representatives from almost every continent that are making significant and huge contributions to it. It's this international kind of renaissance where elevated horror is really happening in a fantastic way. And I think that it's fun for me to watch films like Impetigore, Queen of Black Magic, or Satan's Slaves, because they are elevated, they are really smart, but man, they're batshit, balls to the wall, gory, supernaturally horrific, not afraid to hurt all of the things that you're not supposed to hurt in horror, like kids and animals and all that good stuff. Like, it's so great, man.
Yeah, I think, your mention of the Asian horror wave, I think that's the point where, it really did. It pivoted from slashers to death not being the worst thing that can happen to you.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like Kurosawa's Cure or Pulse, where there's just so much, and The Grudge too.
Punishment.
And there's so much else going on. And it's up to the individual to not necessarily survive it, but just endure it and hope that it goes away. I realized I confused Impetigore with another of his films. Gundala did play at TIFF at Midnight Madness in 2019.
That's a film of his I have not seen. I will go check it out.
It is a superhero film. And it's,
I don't know. I mean, I know of it. I haven't watched it yet. It's based on, I think, a comic or something. I can't remember, but I've heard of it. I've been meaning to seek it out. Is it in the horror like adjacent space, or is it just a standalone? It's a straight up
that's what's that's what's so odd about it. I mean, it is his film very much. It feels a lot like his energy, but it is a straight superhero movie. I mean, theoretically, you could take a family to see it.
Wow.
Theoretically.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe I'll let my kids see it. Because I'm certainly not going to let them watch Satan's Slaves or Impetigore or
I think having
the other stuff of his I've seen.
Yeah, I think having gore in the title is a pretty red flag there. Like literally a red flag to people.
So you haven't seen it yet?
I have not, no. So this is fascinating to me. So
fantastic. I want to give the credit to Shudder. It was either Shudder or through God, we need to look it up and see if it's on Shudder or if it was on Shudder. It was either I really do think it was through Shudder, but I know Fangoria repped it and was giving it attention. And I'm a big, all of my discoveries in horror since I was a kid have been hugely influenced by Fango. But now in the last 2 years, I've been probably a daily Shudder watcher. So I just make a lot of discoveries on Shudder that I love. But at Impetigore, there's some definite like connectivity and some connective tissue to his other films that you've seen. But it's really something about it to me that connected personally. I'm a kid who grew up in like a suburban, but on the edge of rural community in Kansas. So I was on the very most southern suburb of Kansas City, which, 2 blocks from me just turned into farmland back in the 80s when I was a kid. And then I went away to the big city. I went to Chicago to study acting and then became a theater actor and blah, blah, blah. My career, I never really went home except for visits, obviously, to see family and, do things back in KC. And I eventually went back there to make a movie, and going back home and really taking off the rose glasses and looking as contemplatively as you can at your childhood, your hometown, your family. It's filled with, I hope for most people, like wonderful pockets of joy and discovery and bliss. But there was for me just, some real boils that had to be lanced of just darkness and really, painful stuff and horror. And then I watched this film, which is this, this girl works in, she's like a toll booth operator. And there's really creepy, wonderful sequences at the beginning when you think what the film's about. And she basically kind of follows these breadcrumbs that lead her to this house that she's supposedly inherited. That's way out in the country where, her roots stem from. And kind of the plan is like she and her friend who've been trying to start their own business, they're going to go and find this old house and clean it up and sell it and make a profit and get out of all the debt that they're in. And when they get to the village, from whence her people came, she uncovers just some really like, Ed Gein meets Rosemary's Baby kind of shit that's just grody and terrifying. And then the gloves come off and the movie's bonkers. It's so great.
Yeah, and that does sound like something that would resonate with you as you've just described your upbringing, right? Like you get out of a place and come back and find out the place still wants to kill you. That sounds like this movie.
Yeah. And there's a whole ritual around in this film about, child abuse and, just really, really horrible acts that people will do, especially uneducated people, in their belief that it will solve their problems, that it will, bring them salvation. And we see that that's been really hard in the United States in the last couple of years. You see how our disservice to people's education in our country has led to the absurdity of the horror that we've kind of been living in the last couple of years, and it seems to be only getting more prominent. And I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, dude, people getting their skin peeled off. Like, we're talking like some brutal spirits. There's like puppets made out of dead kids' body parts. You got anybody out there who's like, and anybody who's turned off by what I'm saying, but who loves good movies and loves a really great story and really, by the way, the actors, I mean, I know he uses and reuses a lot of the same talent. They're so freaking good. Like, I'm so mesmerized by the performances that he gets out of the actors that he gets in his films, but the performance in this, oh my God, so good.
Oh yeah, I just noticed Tara Basro is the lead in Satan's Slaves as well. She's the lead in Impetigore as well.
She's so good, dude. She's awesome. I hope she hears this too and knows she has very big fans over here.
Well, I think it is.
I say over here, but I'm not even in the United States right now. I'm in Berlin, Germany, making another horror movie. I'm in Berlin. Yes, it's 7:20 in the PM here. I'm making a Dracula picture in Berlin, Germany. How cool is that? How many times in my life will I get to say I'm in Berlin making a movie about Dracula? Yeah, that's kind of weird.
That's that is going on the watch list. Who are you working with? What's the project?
Andre Overdahl. Are you familiar with Andre?
Of course, yes.
Yeah,
Troll Hunter.
So Andre, yeah, and speaking of Del Toro, I mean, Andre is been mentored by Del Toro, and Del Toro produced or oversaw, I know, Scary Stories, which I love, but Troll Hunter, Autopsy of Jane Doe, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Andre's a beautiful person, but he's also just a phenomenal talent, and he loves horror, and he's like a great student of horror. And I'm a lifelong fan of the book Dracula by there's my son. I'm a lifelong fan of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and there's a chapter in the book about the Demeter, which is the cargo ship that carries Dracula's belongings and Dracula himself, basically from
Carpathia to London, right? Like it arrives with London, all the rats.
That's right. With one crew member remaining, the captain,
lashed to the wheel, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
I love that.
So we're making that movie right now.
It's awesome.
It's awesome.
That's okay. That could work. That's a part of the story that never makes it into the movie adaptations.
It's its own story. I mean, it's its own film, and it's the script is so good, man, and Andre's vision is so good, and I can't say very much about it. Obviously, I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk about it at all, but I can just say, dude, I cannot wait for people to see this movie. It's like, and for me, it's just, I've been on a role of just getting to work with filmmakers who I love so much, and then be a part of properties that are inspired by, I should say films that are inspired by properties that I adore, from Dune to Suicide Squad, you name it, all the Ant-Man stuff that I've gotten to do with Peyton and so many other things. It's like spoiled with these riches, but Dracula is, you ask anyone who knows me, like, very important to me, and getting to to be a part of telling this story. And here's what I'll say about it that I think they wouldn't mind me saying. It's just my opinion, but I'm a fan of so many different Dracula movies. I love Coppola's. I love all the way back. I mean, I think Jack Palance is really a scary Dracula. I think that Christopher Lee's done some of the best Dracula work we'll ever see. I'm a huge fan of watching Lugosi, but it has been a minute, if ever, that we've seen a truly scary Dracula picture. I think that Dracula isn't necessarily a scary monster. I think he's a freaking cool monster that has all these wonderful things about him that people love. But I don't think of Dracula as a scary monster. And I believe Andre is going to make the first truly terrifying Dracula picture in a very long time.
Oh, God, I have so many questions I want to ask, but I'm not going to because I don't want to spoil it for myself. There is so much meat in the concept of Stoker's Dracula and the idea of an infectious evil. I mean, obviously, it's more relevant than ever now.
Yeah, for sure. But it's like big issues, dealing with a lot of existential questions, I think, that you get to work with when you're thinking about vampirism and when you're thinking about Dracula in particular and love. It's a very romantic, I mean, it's a baroque, romantic, Gothic novel. The novel I adore. I think it's just I love reading it. I read it every so often. I've had my own pitches I've tried to put together as far as in fact, I wanted to pitch the Demeter. I always said, oh my God, this is aliens on a boat in 1897. That was always my pitch. I was like, I want to take Demeter out. And I was talking to my friend, Ryan Turk from Blumhouse when I was trying to spitball some ideas at him. And I told him that I had this idea of telling the story of the Demeter. And he goes, dude, it exists. It's an incredible script and it's going to be made. And sure enough, here we are now. And I happen to get to be in the film. Amblin is producing it and it's in the right hands. But I'm working on, I don't know if you ever remember or ever learned or studied about Varney, who preceded Dracula.
Yeah.
I'm working on I've been working for the last 2 years with some people I love over at Legacy Effects House. We put together something inspired by Varney, which I cannot wait to make. So as you could tell, I am deeply in the movies that we discussed today, not vampirism for sure, but definitely a lot of blood splattering all over the fucking place. His movies are bloody.
Yeah, well, Satan's Slaves, which I was surprised after I saw it to find out that it's a remake of an 80s movie, although that kind of explains the setting and a bunch of other things. Sure. The joy of that movie is watching someone filter ancient concepts through a personal lens. And it sounds like Impetigore does the same thing. So, I mean, by the time this episode comes out, I will have watched it, I promise you. But the attraction of something like that along the lines of what he's done with his other films. I mean, that sounds simple and doable. And based on what you've said with puppets of native people, it skyrockets off into something else entirely.
It does. And I just want, your listeners to make the discovery, because I feel like, again, the horror may be too much if you get scared easily, or if that's not your cup of tea. I get it, but I feel like you should give it a chance, because I think this is also someone who's going to be just continuing to turn in some really. We always underestimate, I think, when looking at it from the art point of view, the power and importance of entertaining people as well. And again, I think I find the films highly entertaining, even if they're incredibly unnerving, really get under your skin. But I like that sensation. I don't mind it. I think that's what's drawn me like a moth to the flame my whole life to horror. And I get a total rush out of it. I get a total charge and kick out of it. But I also, I'm as scared of death as everybody else is. And we can try and cloak ourselves in, whatever kind of opium we want, but at the end of the day, it still scares the shit out of all of us. Ask anybody who's got a car, speeding towards them, or a man running at them with an axe. I don't care what they believe, they're going to be scared. So I don't know. I think I think his movies really go into the good dark places. You guys got to check it out.
Yeah,
and
that's
see
what I love about
Impetigore.
it too. Yes, that's what I love about this stuff too. I want to be troubled. I want to be disturbed.
I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of one of those movies.
My thanks to David Dastmalchian, who you can see as Polka Dot Man in the Suicide Squad this Friday, August 6th.
And there you go.
Should also keep an eye out for the comic book he writes, Count Crowley, Reluctant Midnight Monster Hunter. The first volume is available in a trade paperback from Dark Horse Comics, but the second volume is coming soon after some time off for COVID. It's a fun, weird monster comic. You should check it out. And thanks also to Monique Gonzalez. She knows what she did. You can find David on Twitter at Dastmalchian, and you can find Impetigore streaming on Shudder wherever Shudder is. It's also available on Apple TV and Google Play, but really, subscribe to Shudder. It's not expensive, and there's a lot of good stuff. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner, and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com, where I'm hosting the Now What podcast. It's weekly now, every Friday. And I write the Now streaming newsletter. That comes out every Saturday. You can find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you've been enjoying us. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're there. The latest episode of The Read has an especially timely look back at the whole Bennifer thing. That's fun. Stay home, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your shot if you can. I'll see you next time.